Yeah, now I also got a message. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you everybody for joining in for the another session of Gravitas Wins show. And thank you, KK, for agreeing to review this particular book, Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. And as I was telling you, KK, I watched one of the masterclass by Bob Iger, and it was really fascinating. And so I'm looking forward for today's review. Thanks, Joyce, Sakwinder, and Priya, and Ashwini for joining in. Hopefully, we'll have a very good discussion after the book review. Thank you. Over to you, KK.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, everyone who joined today evening. So this book it has been in my reading list for quite some time. This one on Netflix, the Reed Hastings book. And then finally I got to it the second half of this year. And I always felt after reading this book, because this book was like a novel, I mean, the fiction sort of thing, right? Like once you start it's one of those books that you don't want to put it down. And definitely it was a very engaging book, a lot of insights on running a business. This book is actually, I think, true to being a creative guy. I mean, he has led a creative business for almost 45 plus years. And last almost like 10, 15 years or so, he was at the leadership level, and he ran this overall Disney company, which I think growing up, all of us would have watched some of their shows. And even now, I think most of you might be having this Disney Plus app on the streaming, all of that. So he made that decision. He was part of that decision. He was one of the guys who started that, actually, the streaming, taking a decision to move from conventional TV and that sort of thing to embracing technology for media. So those are some of the decisions he took during his tenure as the CEO. But more importantly, this book, it talks about his journey, right from the way he started from his childhood to when his first employment to the first half is still he becomes CEO. I mean, the decision to nominate him or to be elected as the CEO. So there are two halves of the book, like again, very creatively designed, right? Like themed book. So the first half of the book is called Learning. 7 chapters are there. And then the second half of the book is called Leading, and all the topics are related to that. So it's equally divided, 7 chapters on learning and 7 chapters on leading. And the prologue, from the prologue itself, it is very interesting. He starts with the situation where he was there in China to open the Disneyland, Shanghai Disneyland, one of the largest, one of the largest projects they have done in the entire history of Disney. So that was the high point, so to say, in his career. But in spite of that, there were 2 incidents that happened during that phase, that week, actually, the same week, which doesn't allow him to enjoy or be present in the moment. I mean, that's the first prologue. The prologue, he talks about those that incident. On one side, he is sitting along with the Chinese premier, the who's who of China. And on the other side, he was battling things happening at Disney's businesses, some shootout in Orlando resort, as well as a boy, small kid getting attacked by alligator and eaten by, being killed by alligator in one of the beach resorts. So that's the conflicting situations he has gone through. So as a result, he shares quite a lot of insights. I mean, at the end of the prologue itself, he lists down 10 principles for leadership. And then towards the end, there is an appendix which also captures all the important points he makes through in the second half of the chapter, which is about leading. And he captures a lot of gist of the important points in that appendix. So it makes for a very good read, and the book is also very well structured. So to say that, so much so that Bill Gates, in his Gates notes, where he maintains this blog, he writes all his thoughts, and that's his blog, Microsoft's founder Bill Gates' blog. It's called Gates Notes. In that, he says this is the only other business book he recommends apart from Business Adventures. So that is, I mean, and he goes on to say why it is important, and he reviews that book actually. This is the only other book he is probably in the non-fiction or business category. He had given that. That line itself is there in that blog, that I've never recommended any business books, or so to say, except for this Business Adventures book. And this is one of the book that I would say that everyone should read. So that shows how much value it is there when Microsoft chairman says that he is recommending this book. This is the only other business book he is recommending. And interestingly, Bob Iger also worked closely with Steve Jobs, because at some point in time they were enemies, fighting few things on business front. And then he goes on to acquire Pixar Films, which was owned by Steve Jobs, was one of the main shareholders of Apple. So that part usually it comes in the second half of the book actually, but that's the type of person we are dealing with here. And after this is also a very interesting time to review this book, because Bob Iger makes a comeback. I mean, he retired around 2021, and 2020, early 2020, February 2020, he handed over to one of his deputies, or an in-house person, Bob Chapek, as the CEO. And around 2 years back, after 2 years, the Disney board decides to replace Bob Chapek with Bob Iger again. Now he is in his late 70s, if I'm not wrong. Now again, like 2 weeks back, he's now back as the CEO of Disney actually. So it's a very interesting times to review this book again. I'm so fortunate to do that. So the book starts, in the prologue around June 2016, where Bob Iger is in Shanghai, China, to open this Disneyland. They had been in this managing this project, or been part of this initiative for more than almost like 15 plus years since they started to till it actually finally took off, and it got open. There has been the usual political stuffs. In fact, at one point of time, the guy with whom they were negotiating, a Chinese, one of the government officials, the lead government official, he was jailed actually. And the project again went back, and 2 years or 3 years it was in limbo. And then again they resumed, and they went and went to the inauguration. So the project itself had a very long journey, and it was one of the dream projects for Disney and for Bob Iger specifically, because he's the only guy who was there in this project since day one. I mean, he says that in the book. And it costed somewhere around $900+ million or so. I think I exactly say that it's actually, sorry, $6 billion built on 960 acres actually. So it was by far the largest Disneyland property. Looks like it is 11 times of the original one. And at some point of time, it was housing like 14,000+ workers and all of that. So that's the size of the overall project itself. And they went and recruited more than 1,000+ artists, singers, dancers, and etc. to perform during the opening ceremony. So that's the size of the scale of the project itself. And the Chinese premier at that point of time, as well as Barack Obama, who was the US president at that point of time, they all wrote letters to him, congratulating him and all of that. So it was a very important milestone beyond business. Two nations, US and China, where also this project was very strategic about that. So given that backdrop, just 3-4 days before or something like that, there was a mass shootout that happened closer to the Orlando Disneyland project, Disneyland theme park actually, back in US. So it was a conflicting situation. Here he was overseeing the preparatory work for one of the largest project, and back at home they were battling out this mass shootout. And so naturally, right, like as a leader, you are going to be concerned, and Disney is known for being humane and empathetic and all of that. So he says that immediately, I mean, they have a system within Disney that within like few hours, they will be able to trace every Disney employee, whichever country, any natural, I mean, impact or any sort of situation, they'll be able to trace back that employee and see like what is the situation, all of that. So they had built a system like that. So immediately their team, I mean, was put into action, and they started investigating. And towards the surprise, this guy who was the shooter, he had actually visited Disneyland like 6 months back, the same Disneyland 6 months back, and just a week back also. And upon investigation, it was also revealed that he was supposed to do this at this park, but he was stopped because of there was some other event that was happening closer to the park. So he elaborates on this overall incident, and talks about the choices as an executive leader. That on one hand you are on a high, but on the other hand, this sort of emergency, national security emergency is happening. So I'm not sure like how many of us would go through this sort of a situation in our career, but this is something like it gives a peek into some of these very interesting scenarios, and the feelings that we go through, right? Like how to manage that at that point of time. So any of you had gone through like some situation like this where you are on one hand, maybe in a personal front, something great is happening, and but on the other hand, something else, very conflicting, challenging situation was happening. Any thoughts that you'd like to share?
Probably Sukhvinder can share something. Of Sukhvinder, do you have it?
There are a lot. I think one is very interesting. I will share. I was working with the Volvo, and I did something in an exceptionally low lead time, and I was being awarded in the first half, and in the second half there was some shortage of a particular component which I was to look after in supply chain, and my name was flashing on the production line. So people were a bit confused that whether it is being flashed as a honor or so I was also laughing, and I was scolded in the second half because that shortage should not have happened. So things do happen, and in my business also, I think the same day you are either being awarded a tender, and at the same time you are losing a project. So it's part of the game. We do experience these things, and I think with time we have started to live with this. We have, I think, learned it hard way, but we have learned to handle these emotions.
Okay.
Thanks Sukhvinder. Anyone else? Joyce, Priya, Ashwini is having a throat problem, so she will not be able to speak. But Priya, Joyce, anything?
Yeah, Joseph. I mean, even in our the regular job that we are doing, I mean, we experience a problem in one ship, but at the other time, we, as a supply chain group, we were able to fulfill the needs of another ship. So these, the plus and the minus keeps happening in our work also. So one side, we, as Sukhvinder said, we do face some scoldings because we were not able to meet the date time, and sometimes, yes, we are appreciated that we were able to, do a very critical supply. So it's part of the job.
Yeah. So this is interesting, KK. When we think of Bob Iger, I mean the big shots, right? Bill Gates, Bob Iger, and all of those people. We think they have deputies, they have so many people working for them, so many things will be taken care of for them, and they are all beyond these mundane things. Like remember the conflict of the emotions. Obviously, this particular incident that he is talking about, it's huge, humongous.
Yeah.
But when you look at Bob Iger, I mean, a lot of people like this, they're the top guys. It doesn't even come to our mind that they might feel the same kind of a situation. Obviously, it is multiplied, amplified multiple times. But something like what Priya said, like I mean, on one side we are scolded, And on another side, we are appreciated almost on a same time, same day kind of a thing. But when you read it this way, going through the biography is not just the non-fictional management stuff, but the real life biographies. When we read it, it inspires you and helps you to put things in perspective. So I think this is a very good thing to discuss. Thanks, KK. Thanks, Sukhvinder and Priya.
So at that point of time, I mean, it's all happening in parallel, right? So how to manage the situation and all of that, they're planning. And Bob Chapek at that point of time was the head of parks and resorts, under which this was part of. So he sends one of his deputies, basically, who was also there in Shanghai, but they asked him to fly to on ground to provide executive level support, because it's a big situation, and it's a I mean, in America, these sort of mass shootouts, it's a big thing, right? So it's also a national security issue. So because all the leadership team has have traveled all the way from US to China, and they were all going through this. And this point of time, they send one of their executive level person to there. And to this, he says, Bob Iger says that I read, you trust your people to do their jobs and focus your energy on some other pressing issue. Even though there are a lot of things to take care of, but I think at some point of time you have to leave that to the person who is on the ground and trust their instincts, and you just sit back and just get just provide whatever support is needed instead of getting involved, etc. So on your point, Joseph, like on the thing, right, like he also mentions there are different threat scales at which certain things comes to him directly, and certain things take time, and there is a process and other things. So he has sometimes stated his team that at least give the bad news sooner to me. But in spite of that, there is a process through which messages travel to him, and things are filtered and things like that. So in this incident, so he recollects that even at that internal threat scale, this is the sort of thing that will get his immediate, will come to him faster. So to your point, I think running a major organization comes with all its different varied, nuances. On the same week, another incident just before 2 days before the opening, an alligator, it's a water theme park, right? So there is a small family that travels from somewhere to the Florida resort and the Orlando resort. So Florida to Orlando they have traveled, and so this kid 2 year, I think 2 or 2.5 year was this kid, and I think at the night time the family went out to see some movie or something, but because of lightning and other things, they didn't. It didn't happen. The show didn't happen. So they come to the beach side, and they were sitting on the lawn, and this kid goes closer to some water body, and the alligator was, being fed. And at that point of time, because it was not a time when visitors are usually closer to that, and it takes the kid and goes down, and the kid is actually lost at that point of time. So more than 100 years of history of Disney theme parks, never ever such thing has happened. And this news also comes to him, like this is something which is happening, and this is also getting news coverage back in the US. So again, he was going through these motions, like how to manage this, and to avoid by avoiding all the protocols, generally he is not allowed to speak to these sort of people. There is this chief communication officer who is also along the with him in this trip, because of this massive event in Shanghai. So she comes and says, most of the time she's very straight, and she doesn't agree to certain of these point of views, even though he wants to do certain things. But at this point of time, she when he says that I want to talk to their parents, the kids' parents, she says, okay, this is the right thing to do at this point of time. And they both rehearse what needs to be talked and other things. So he calls the family's friend who has just gone to accompany, because after the situation, and it tells to him that I need to speak to their parents. If they're fine, it's okay, but otherwise, just express my sympathies. I'm really deeply saddened about this incident. And this guy talks to his father, and father comes on the call, and he says, I'm extremely sorry about this, and all those the thing, right? And that guy father asked, I mean, make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. My son's life should count, actually. So he assures that, yeah, I mean, this will be taken care of. So this word, right, this assurance also means that at one level, at a legal level, there is some sort of negligence, acceptance, all of that, which is very costly. And I think the legal guy also is sitting closer with him when he's attending this call. And I think he went overboard and he gave this commitment. Sometimes it could also be construed that there was a part of negligence on Disney and it could cost the company billions. I mean, even though these are all the guys who are like larger than life and other things, at a human level, at an emotional level, they are very sometimes it's all the same, whatever maybe the person, and all these legalese and other things. I mean, it is up to the leadership team and the people who are in that role to act in a manner in which is suitable for that situation. So I think that team at that point of time was in favor of doing whatever it is right at this point of time, at least emotional front and communication front. And he sat down on the couch and he started crying. And it was just few hours before the opening ceremony, actually, in China at that point of time. And his wife comes and pacifies him and says that, yeah, whatever we need to do, let's do all of that. So I think at some point, I mean, these are all the inspirational leaders, but at some other level, we're also human, and we also need to realize that it's human tendency to communicate in the manner in which the other human appreciates and yeah, respond to. So that is what makes us all at least normal humans, right? Otherwise, we are living in a different world. Yeah. So it is a very interesting situation. After that, he goes on and he delivers the speech, and one of the partners, I mean, the strategic partners of the theme park, comes and says that you are not going to speak about that alligator attack incident here, right? Because it's a very happy occasion. You don't want to spoil the mood, all of that. The local Chinese person who is the partner. So he doesn't talk about that, but yeah, I think these are the background scenes that happen during that epic monumental situation where this was happening. Yeah, so that's all in the prologue. I mean, it's an interesting way. I mean, this book, again, it's like a movie, right? Like he starts off with a hook, actually, and it's a very interesting situation. So it's like a climax, actually. He moves the climax of the book to the beginning, and from there on, it's really a ride of the lifetime, actually. So he takes you on that journey. I mean, gets you on the hook, and the entire journey, there is a lot of interesting incidents and anecdotes that come. Yeah.
So you are reading it in multiple layers, or even as a storyteller.
Yeah,
so you are kind of.
Yeah, because for me, I think very rarely this sort of thing happens. I mean, generally, right, like books, I start from always the acknowledgements. Even I read the acknowledgements and all of that from the first chapter, literally paper to paper, I try to read most of the times. And I'm glad that I started reading from the prologue, because usually prologue people don't read, or they start from the chapter 1. But this is a very important and interesting thing. It is even not part of the chapter 1 and 2. The Roman numerals are the page numbers, actually. So it's not really technically the start of the book. But yeah, I think a very important point, couple of leadership lessons, like acting on crisis, and then about team management, delegating responsibilities. All of that also is covered in this first few pages itself. So, and also like how you manage these emotions, right? Like you're all human at the end of the day. So that's also coming out, shows that he's a human in the first place, because we all, like what you said, Joseph, we all think that these guys are all like the very high end of the thing and nothing affects them. But it also shows his inner person. I mean, removing the mask and just showing what is his true color and things like that. So, which was very fascinating, because you don't get to read such type of things often at that level.
The one thing that I'm repeatedly seeing, probably our view of the leadership is also shifting.
Yeah.
Because when probably 20 years back or so, it was all the strongest leaders kind of a thing.
Yeah.
These people do not waver. They are very strong. They don't rethink their decision. They take their decision. They move on. And people like Larry Ellison, right? Like, I mean, very strong emotionally, or at least that's what they show outside.
Yeah.
But in the last 5-6 years, at least what I'm observing is that more and more it is shifting towards appreciating the vulnerabilities in these leaders.
Yeah.
And then I don't know whether because I am growing, so I'm starting to notice that. I don't know, but I'm seeing more and more the leaders, the real leaders whom you are all appreciating and admiring, or the people who come off and say, "Hey, you know what? I'm also like you."
Yeah.
It's just at a different level, but I'm also like you. In some ways, I fall on a couch and cry just before going and for the biggest milestone of my life. I've fallen, cry. My wife has to come and console me. And why? Because of this. So I'm seeing a lot of people are, sometimes it is orchestrated because people want to fall into this kind of a hype.
Yeah.
But most often we can actually identify who they are. But when people do it genuinely, that's when you are able to appreciate that particular incident. So yeah.
So he says as a line, right? It was a happy day in my career, but it's the saddest day again. So even the adjectives are like happy, saddest, that sort of relation he makes actually. So it was one of the biggest milestones, but it was also the most, the saddest means that's the worst thing that would have happened. And if you read this book, I don't think anything beyond this. There is one phase that he goes through where he becomes, the process of him becoming the CEO. That is one of the longest stressful days he might have had. But it's not really a saddest, but this is like the saddest which he captures. So, which is very interesting.
The one of the thing that you said was you start from the prologue, the first page. Xavier didn't join. You know that Xavier reads indexes also.
Okay, I don't know that so far. Index level. Yeah, but yeah, I think it's good. So he talks about his business, right? Like on normal days, it is about, he says that on the least eventful days, his job requires an ability to adapt and readapt. But it's not usually as per the plan. So to think about that. And then he says why somebody should read this book. And he talks about, universal ideas, even though it's all about business and other things, but talks about risk-taking and creativity. He says, about building a culture of trust within the company, because at that point of time, it was like 130,000 employees. That's 1.3 lakh employees were associated with Disney, and which means, and they're all operating across different geographies, different races, different people, language, different races, all of that. So imagine building that trust, sense of trust. And we always have been, in MBA programs, the epitome of service, it's always quoted with Disney, because you enter into the theme park, people always welcome warm. I have not been to that, but whoever has gone, they all have experienced and they all talk highly about the customer service. Am I audible now? I think I lost some time.
No, you're audible, KJ.
Okay.
So you were talking about this Disney being quoted. So recently there is also this experience, not just the customer experience, but whole thing as an experience. Even before this Starbucks came onto the show, it was Disney which was quoted a lot more as an example for building a brand by giving customer experience, the best customer experience you can have. And in every theme parks, they have a very different way of handling things. So that the customer, because again, they are operating across cultures. Certain things which are accepted in certain culture, which are like, which wows the customer, may not be the same in some other culture. So, Joyce, I think you have been to different Disneylands, right? Would you want to share any experience of going to these Disneylands? I think she has been to one in Singapore and in the US.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've not really enjoyed it as such because I was all alone and I went there on a official trip. So yeah, so not much of an experience as such, if you really ask me. But the one thing which amazes me is like the huge thing and the way the people enjoy there. That always amazed me. But otherwise, I didn't have any real experience of spending a lot of time and all those things because I was always alone and I didn't want to go there alone because it was not a place for being alone and spending that, because it's vast, right? So that itself like scares you to be alone also.
Maybe this is the time you should sponsor all of us to go.
I'll raise my hand first. Joyce,
You-
you should note that I raised the hand first before Joseph.
You don't have to take us to US. Singapore is more than good enough for us.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, and then as we move on, like to the first chapter, this is the we are entering just in the first chapter. I just covered only the prologue. So he starts this career as one of the lowest member of within the overall ecosystem. An interesting journey about this is he has been with the same company or in the same ecosystem almost for 45 years. He started off as a crew operator, supervisor or something of that nature in 1974 July. And that company, ABC, was acquired by another company called a smaller company, actually, Capital Cities Communication. So he stayed along in that acquisition. This company was bought over, and he went through that journey. Like at that point of time, he was heading one of the divisions within the ABC network. They had sports, news, entertainment, multiple aspects of business, but the whole thing was bought over by this company, smaller company actually, relatively smaller than the ABC group, but they somehow managed to pull it off with support from Warren Buffett and other things. So it was run by two persons called Tom Murphy and Dan Bodke, and so they buy this company, and he goes through that journey. And at some point of time, he also contemplated about quitting, because usually when companies are acquired and you are the acquired company, usually at the top level, there will be some sort of a shift and unrest, and people usually leave and things like that. We have seen in many companies in India also. When Mindtree was acquired by L&T, a lot of these, the first level went off, and even a leader joins from outside organization or a larger organization. The next level leadership, generally there is some unrest and instability and other things. So even
as we speak, NDTV is going through that.
Yeah. So it's again a media company. So he sticks through that, and Tom and Dan have a different way of working and things like that. And he goes through the journey, and at some point of time, he was made the COO, like after a few years, like 3-4 years after acquisition, he was made the COO, the chief operating officer of this combined entity. And before he could enjoy the fruits of that, maybe in a year or two, Walt Disney, the Walt Disney company, which was that point of time managed or run by Michael Eisner. So he comes and buys this group, and as part of the deal itself is structured in a manner that this guy Bob Iger has to stay along with this acquisition for 5 years, and has to run this entity, the acquired entity, for 5 years. So there has been some back and forth negotiations and etc. Very interesting way how they negotiate and how they go into the minor details, all of that. He hires a lawyer, Bob hires a lawyer to negotiate on his behalf, and at one point of time he gets a call from his then boss saying that your negotiations are stalling the overall $20 billion acquisition. Why don't you agree and get along? So Bob's contention was he should be reporting to Michael Eisner directly, while Michael Eisner feels that he really needs some more time and some sort of freedom to choose who should report to him, because once you make somebody report to him, it's a natural indication that, okay, these are the guys who has the probability to succeed and things like that. So these are the minor nuances, but at the larger scheme of things, a $20 billion deal is stuck because of one person's expectation and things like that. So then, I mean, when he was going through this decision-making process, he also contemplated at that point of time quitting, because he was expected to move from East Coast to West Coast, and he did this couple of times through this career. So he was basically a New York, closer to New York guy. And once ABC acquired, he moved to the West Coast, where the Hollywood studios and other things, because they were in the business of making movies and things like that. And then at the point of time, he also went through a family separation. I mean, he divorced his wife, and him parted ways, the first wife and thing. But he still wanted to stay closer to the kids. He had 2 daughters from his first marriage, so he wanted to stay closer. So, I mean, even though the job was big, there was money and fame and all of that. Again, like all of us, people go through the same thing, with the family pushes and pulls and things like that. So that is at one layer that happens, and the other layer is he has stayed with the same company. I mean, coming back to that, 45 years or so, he has stayed with the same company, even though it was acquired and things like that. So, and eventually he get to the top, and he was, I think, if I'm not wrong, the longest serving CEO in the Disney company. And now again, he's making a second innings. So which means for sure he's going to be one of the longest, though this time they had been given a mandate that 2 years only he's going to stay to steady the ship and other things. But the point is actually, I think even though we call some people, I mean, to get opportunities, people jump and do all of this. But in a company, he starts the lowest level and he has rose through the ranks with 2 acquisitions, and going on to lead the bigger entity which acquired him. That itself shows that his leadership capabilities, the acumen and other things. And it's a very different industry, right? In the creative industry, you have to be always on his toes, and technology was causing massive disruptions and other things. So he lived through all of that. He orchestrated some of the largest deals during his CEO stint. He acquired all the famous studios, Lucasfilms, the Star Wars, George Lucas, he bought those rights from him. Pixar, even though they were on the wrong side, they started off on a wrong side with Steve Jobs. He managed to convince Steve Jobs to sell that Pixar to Disney. And 20th Century Fox, again, it was again a bigger conglomerate. That was his last acquisition before he hung up his boots. So it was a very interesting journey, so to say. And he went through a lot of pushes and pulls throughout his this career, actually.
Now that you raised this, KK, I know Priya and Joyce, I think to a large extent, Ashwini also, they've been with the same company for long. For me, this is the longest that I've been with the company. Otherwise, every 3-4 years or so, I switch. How do you think about this? I know, KK, now you switched, but then you've been in in another company for a very long time. How do you think about this? Switching or staying, especially now that you have read this book, right? I mean, this guy has been with the same company, started as a crew manager, ended up as a CEO. Yeah. What's the plus and minus, especially all of us are working, except Sukhwinder, all of us are employees in one fashion or the other. What are your views? Again, I'm not asking you to speak for one or the other. What are your views as you read through this? What do you think about this?
Yeah, see, I always like and want to do that sort of thing. I mean, preferred always, because closer to home, I have seen, for example, N. Chandrasekharan, that's a classic example. He started off as a software programmer, the lowest level in a software company. He went on to lead that company. Now he had gone on to lead the Tata Group, which is the group in India to lead, right? Like any person worth its salt has aspiration. So that's the biggest thing you can have. And he has gone through that journey. I think sometimes from my own personal thing, it's also about the opportunities and the type of people, the managers and the leadership team that you get to work with, that also influences. And to a large extent, I think, look, after reading Bob, in Bob's case, it was also that he got very good managers and owners, or the team that he has worked with. They all had always looked at even though he has not seen certain capabilities, there is one point he writes in the summary section about the leadership traits, and in which he says you always hire or put somebody for the ability to do certain things, even though they don't realize that they can do this. So that is something which a lot of us also have self-doubt, and always we are not sure about certain things. But I think I experienced that once in my previous, not in the current, in the last company, but in my previous company, I recent. So one of the manager who hired me, within a year, he told, I mean, we were going through the lift actually. I mean, after a cup of coffee in the evening, he was asking like, KK, why? I mean, what do you think? Like, you will be able to manage this, whatever I am managing now, because. I think you are now fully ready. Why don't you take it up? He was asking. It was like I didn't see that coming. I mean, it's just like 1.5 years or so in that company, and it was a large. I mean, it was one of the, I think, the third largest account for that company. But I was this was like around a 10 million P&L sort of ownership. So I didn't see that coming. So I had something like that to one point of time, but again, right, like it's also about the type of people that you get to work with, and the company culture. All of that matters, and I think that is more important.
Thanks, sir. I think you are raising 2 points. See, as you were speaking, especially when you talked about in Chandrasekhar, see, I think the company, both Disney and this, and when I'm looking at it, like Priya, Ashwini, and Joyce have been in the same companies for a very long time. See, one of the benefits of a larger company is also you might be in the same company, but you will be working in multiple different roles.
Right.
You can take up different challenges. You can move to a different region and work. So that which is for all practical purposes, it's a different job.
Correct. Yeah.
Just that same company, but it's a different job, right? And then you manage something else. And I because I talk to Joyce often. Every 3 years or so, 3-4 years or so, she will take up a different role. So it's very challenging. So like, I mean, you get that particular thing of, you get the benefit of staying long term, but also getting that dopamine of a new job or new thing, and so on and so forth. And the second point that you also mentioned is also about, and which I can allude to, having managers who think you can do more than what you think you can do.
Yeah.
And they kind of nudge you. They're not forcing it. They're not kind of washing up their hands. They gently push you into that and then stand back and give you support. I mean, all my growth has come from such people. I mean, whatever that you talked about, so which is good. Joyce, Priya, I know Ashwini has a bad throat. Priya, Joyce, do you want to talk about, if you can, otherwise you don't have to, staying long term in a company? What are the benefits, not benefits, anything?
Yeah, I had similar points to those 2 points, right? Like specifically the second point, right? Like managers push you. They know it's kind of a long-term relationship. So what happens is they know your plus and minus. So they are. It's easy for you, and it's easy for them to push you when it is really required or when it's the right time. The other 2 points that I also wanted to mention is, since you're a long timer in a company, people know you more than you knowing people. People know you, so it's easy. Like Joseph said, right? Like I change internally. I've been changing my job always like 3 years once. So it's easy to find out the opportunities also. Because your network within the company at least is or within that particular org is kind of strong, that you can find opportunities, and you will, if you can go ahead and talk to people to get that opportunity at the right time and things like that. That's one thing I always felt, that it's good when you stay for a long time. Another thing is, like, it's more on a problematic side. I always found that because people, the people around you are known people, the resetting the expectations is quite tough. That's one thing which I always found, that it's, at least a person like me, it's very tough. You have a preset expectation set with them. you first of all, you find it to be like going against that particular expectation. Then there is a push from some other side, so that you have to go and then you talk. So it takes a lot of stress and kind of effort also. That's one thing which kind of very difficult if you're staying in a long term, because if I just go to another company, anyways, it's all from zero. It's from scratch. So reset, there is nothing called as resetting the expectation. Whatever expectation you're setting is what is you. But here you need to reset the expectation, and because I've been with my current company for 18 years. Like, so not all 18 years are always ups, and there will be ups and downs on both sides, right? Like corporate and personal side. So you will have to reset the expectation. So that will become challenge, is what I always felt.
That's a very good point. Thanks, Joyce. Yeah, KK, go ahead.
Yeah, I think anybody else is speaking? Ashwini or Priya, you want to share?
Priya, do you want to share anything about, plus and minus of staying in a same company for long?
The plus, like Joy said, our name is known across all the teams, so people know you. It's easy to get the job done. I mean, you know the pros and cons, so you know how to get a job done. So that way it becomes very smooth. The cons probably people tend to take you for granted. If you're not able to display your skills over a period of time, then that expectation is it kinds of sets in, and they also know you thoroughly, at least the management, so they know where you are, where they can curtail you, where they can that sort of a thing is also there. So
very true. Thanks Priya. Very true. Yeah, KK.
Yeah, I think my last stint was around close to 8 years. So I also went through that, like 3 different roles I had. And I think for a good, I think it was also a point in time where I made a career shift from being a sales to marketing. So that also happened there. So again, it's about the opportunities that you get, and also other aspects, right? Like what do you want, and that also drives. A few people left because they wanted certain other opportunities, and I was staying on, like for whatever reason, I was getting the different opportunities that came my way. And yeah, I also wanted to balance my family stuff, personal life. So I would say that I also invested a lot of time on that relationship, both on the office front and personal side. So it's about what priorities you set for yourself.
Correct. I don't know, KK, I don't know whether you have time. If I may ask, Sukhinder, one thing that I've always wanted to check with people who run a company as a CEO or a co-founder or whatever. See, employees have promotions, right? Like, developer, senior developer, manager, and or even at a higher level, VP, head of a unit, and so on. There are promotions. You have been a CEO for 8 years, so there's no promotion for you. How do you see the growth? And I've always wanted to find, how do you think about it? What's your mental model? For us, there has to be an increase in salary, there has to be a promotion, whatever. Like, otherwise we'll go and crib with the manager. Whom do you crib? What do you crib about?
I wanted to answer the previous question also when you were discussing about the working class. I consider myself to be an employee only. See, I have worked for 7 years, and the initial years I always thought of that I should learn much faster in my initial career. And whenever I used to feel homely in my company, I used to leave the company. That was the factor. It was the day I started feeling like home, I'll leave the company, because I consider that I am in the right comfort zone now. I should leave now, and I should learn something new now. And in my own company, I think with the number of people we are engaging, we are having 40 plus people now, and the amount of projects we are having, the intensity or the depth of projects, the seriousness or the volume of the size or the ticket size of the projects define the growth of the company, and that satisfies me. And I think I've already shared earlier also. We are doing good. I'm more than happy with things moving. And people have started asking me, for how long are you working in this company? I simply tell them I'm there for last 16 years. And they do ask me, how are the promoters? I tell them they're good. So that is there. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks, Ashwin. Yeah, go ahead, Ashwin.
Yeah, so I'll just move on to the last chapter of the first, half, which is the learning. This is the section where he talks about the whole interview process, his ascendancy to the CEO. He works, the acquisition by Disney of the Capital Cities plus ABC combined happens around, just to check, 1996 or so, I think. Around that time, and he runs this company. Michael Eisner runs this company, and Bob is one level down, and he starts managing stuff. But at some point of time, a lot of Michael Eisner is a very very different sort of personality. He is a bit of an aggression, and he wants to be in control and stuff like that. So it's a very different sort of personality, and because of which he also establishes a strategic planning team or something like that, which actually takes decisions for the business units. So the business unit heads most of the times feels that they are not powerful, they don't have authority, all of that. So that's the style of Michael Eisner. So, and at some point of time, because of the exits and leadership thing, the board feels that time is up for Michael Eisner and they need to look for opportunity, look for outsiders. So Michael Eisner sends a letter to the board saying that around 2004, he writes a letter that by 2006 I'll be out, and it's communicated. So this guy, Bob, walks to the chairman of the board, George Mitchell, and says that what are you going to announce to the press about the process, the replacement process? He says that we are going to look for external candidates and internal candidates. And he asks, are there any internal candidates that you're looking at? He says, there is nobody else other than you. Then I want you to put that in the communication, because I know for sure that 2 years Eisner is going to be a lame duck. And if I don't have the authority to make, if people don't know that, don't realize that I have the power, then I will also be a lame duck along with him, and whatever decisions needs to be taken, it will be in a limbo and other things. So George also accepts that, the chairman of the board also accepts, and they say that, okay, while the board is going through the selection process, Bob is one of the strongest candidates from the internal pool, but we will look at all the possible options. But the board is mostly divided and mostly against him, against Bob taking the top role. And they go through a very long, stringent process. I think more than 15 months or so it takes. So he says at some point of time, he has attended some 15 interviews with the board, along with the entire team, one-on-ones, and some board member will ask at some point of time to have additional one-on-one, things like that. So in all, through the journey, like almost like more than a year or so, he attends like 15 interviews in various formats. And at some point in time, they bring some external assessment guy, right? Like the personal assessment, leadership assessment guy. And he gives a very cold treatment to Bob, actually. So he comes, and I think he has come on a chartered flight or something. And while they were having some discussions, and only he served lunch or something, he was not even asking Bob that you want to have lunch or something. And in midway, somebody comes and tells the charter flight is leaving, and he says to Bob that, okay, my charter flight is leaving, so I need to go now. And so he was pissed off, but Bob says that at the start of the process itself, he tells to himself that, okay, this is going to be really a painful thing. You need to hold your thing and not to show aggression, all of that. But at the end, actually, the last of the thing, one of the guys, board members, who was also not fine with him becoming the thing, he asked, why do you think that we should hire you, something like that. So at that point of time, Bob loses his cool and says that, see, this thing I have answered 3 times to you just for you through this process, and I'm not going to answer this anymore. And he just walks off. He doesn't even sees them in the entire board. He doesn't see them on their eyes, doesn't shake hands, and he walks off. So after the same night, George calls him and says that, you didn't do good either, you didn't do bad either. And then Bob feels that, okay, I think he lost his cool at this point of time, and he even has an anxiety attack, I think the same day or towards that period. So he goes through a very stressful, like more than a year or so sort of journey at that point of time. And I think towards 2005 somewhere, so they make a call, like he is going to be the March 2005. Yeah, March 2005, the board meets and says that, okay, yeah, we have made the decision, and you will be the CEO. And George and the current, the chairman of the board, as well as the current CEO, Mike Lesnar, both come to their home, and they announce that you are going to be the CEO. So, and he just, I think he was with the family and things like that, because he knows that that day is going to be a big day. He's not part of the meeting. And so that's when it ends. And I think after the same day, or maybe in a few days, he calls Steve Jobs, because before this chapter, you might go through that. They had some acrimonious exchanges with Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs says that I'm not going to come your way, all of that. They used to charge more royalty for ABC or Disney's movies, because they considered Pixar they are the ones who are making business for Disney rather than the other way. So there were some business negotiations. So when he calls Steve Jobs and says that, see, I'm the CEO appoint now, and I want to renew the relationship and stuff like that. So Steve Jobs, in his manner, he asks, how long you are working with Michael Eisner? And he said that I am surprised anything will change, something of that sort, and says finally, okay, after the dust settles, call me, we can talk. And that's the final conversation with Steve Jobs, and this chapter ends. So I think a lot of layers to read actually in this. At least I enjoyed reading second time for this. But yeah, I think it's a very classical leadership book, and very practical also, and nothing like, okay, it's like written by a practitioner, so it's not fluff, and a lot of real time, which, I mean, if we are an American, we can relate to even more of the context, because we don't watch ABC News and ABC Entertainment, all of that. And I've not watched most of the movies that he mentions, but they go through a lot of journey, ups and downs, both ABC Entertainment and Disney. So yeah, it's a very interesting book, I would say. I think no doubt Gates recommends this book.
Lovely review, KK. It was very interesting the way you took up for the last 1 hour. I'm just looking at the time, and we have passed an hour, and it didn't feel like we have passed an hour. So wonderful. Thank you very much. Any questions, any comments before we close? Rajneesh, thanks for joining in. Anyone, like Namin, Ashwini, Joyce, Priya, Sukhwinder?
I think very rightly said by Krishna in the last phrase that the book is really rare and it has been written by a practitioner, because I think we can resonate very well with the emotions, the way he's handling those emotions, and the way he's sitting on that couch and crying. So maybe intensity is more, obviously he has a lot to take at those points, but this book really looks very interesting, and this 1 hour has just passed away like anything. And thanks to KK and Joseph for organizing this one, and he's a great storyteller, KK.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Sukhwinderji.
Yes. Anyone else? I know Ashwini cannot speak, but like, I mean, Joyce, Priya, Rajneesh.
I just want to say that.
Yeah, Joyce, go ahead.
No, after hearing all this, I'm just motivated to read this book. You know about me, right? Like, I don't.
KK, you have done your job well.
Okay.
Yeah, done your job really well.
He's a hero. Yeah, he proved he's a hero.
Yes. Lovely, KK.
Thank you, Joyce.
So you said there is a second section, right? I mean, leading. So maybe Joyce and KK can together take this particular thing. I mean, I think that would be
a lot of time to read, but yes, I'm going to read.
Wonderful.
Joseph, you asked someone whether are you reading this book or something, and you will do the next review, and they vanished. So it doesn't happen with Joyce.
I don't have a choice. I can't escape from him.
Lovely,
I can
lovely.
escape from you maybe, but not him, right? So I will be here. But yeah, jokes about like I really thought like a practitioner writing it, so I thought I'll read it. Yeah, I'll read it.
That's one thing that I miss from Indian genre, nonfiction management genre. Even the biographies, they are very shallow. They don't go into the depth of the daily. And I'm sure Indian CEOs are going through, equal or much more stronger emotions and backlashes, especially people like Tata's, which they work across different times, time periods and different geographies and different political classes, all of that. It's a lot more. For some reason, the depth is missing in Indian books. But yeah, like when practitioner writes it, it's very, very close.
Yeah.
Thanks, KK. Priya, Ashwini, do you want to say anything?
Same about as Joy said, I am also looking forward to read the book. It was very, very well dictated. I mean, the way you brought along each points, you highlighted the major incidents that happened. It was very, very well said. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph. And KK, it was a nice session. I mean, it's always like an engaging session. Another Saturday evening well spent for me.
Thank you, Ashwini. She's having a very, very bad throat. But,
Yeah,
she still, yeah.
Thank you, Ashwini, for taking the effort. Yeah.
Thank you, KK. And it was very useful session and the insightful on that particular book. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rajneesh. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.